For those of you who don't know who I am, my name is Amanda Jane Duggan. I am a bariatric success specialist. I help people to be absolutely infinitely successful in their bariatric journey, not just in terms of releasing the weight that they want to release, but also stepping into their absolute best life that they can, full of confidence, happy, and with a vision for the future that allows them everything that they need with their new life and new body. So yeah, so that's what I do. I also own New Leaf Weight Loss Surgery, so I also help people by coordinating them to go to the Czech Republic for weight loss surgery. But this part, my bariatric success specialist coaching, is completely separate from that, although yeah, I do a lot of my work with patients that go to New Leaf, but it's not necessary. So if any of you are struggling with regain, fear around food, self-sabotage, emotional eating, any of those things that you feel that you need some help and support, just give me a shout and I'll let you know how I might be able to help. And one of the ways that I like to help is by doing this on a Wednesday evening. So this is completely free of charge, and I try to give away some tips and strategies every Wednesday evening so that I can help as many people as possible. I'm also a bariatric patient myself, having lost 9 stone, kept the majority of it off for 7.5 years. So yeah, so I do understand exactly where you guys are coming from, and I know what it's like to be walking the same walk as you, and really understand it. So yeah, that's me. Anyhow, less about me, more about you. Hi guys, there's some lovely people on here tonight. There's loads of my coaching clients on tonight. It's because we've got a session straight after this and they know that I'm going to be asking if they've watched it. So yeah, I've got quite a few, well, yeah, a good few of my coaching clients on tonight. So yeah, welcome everybody. So what I want to talk to you tonight is I want to talk about your food script and how your food script shapes your reality in terms of weight, and how you can react to your food script. And what do I mean by food script? So what I mean by food script is the things that you were taught, usually from a very early age, about food. So when you're sitting around the kitchen table or the dining table, or sat in front of the TV at home watching TV when you were younger, however you did it, you know, what were you taught? What were you told that shapes your belief around food? Because what happens is we have very well-meaning parents, and some of you on here as parents tonight might identify some of the things that you're doing with your children, and it might make you think again of the things that you say to your children when they're young that can actually have a detrimental effect on their relationship with food. So I know when I was a young child, the very biggest one that used to get thrown around at our dining table was, don't you know there are starving children in Africa? Get that eaten up. There's people starving in this world. And I go, well, I'm not hungry. Well, just eat it. Get that eaten up. There's starving children in this world. And so give me a number 1 if you were taught this when you were little. If you were taught there were starving children in Africa, you can't leave anything on your plate. You know, and the thing is, let's be fair, unless you could pack it up in a food parcel and send it over to Africa before it goes off, you eating that food is never, ever going to stop those children in Africa from starving. You know, all it is doing, yeah, but loads of people are saying this, that they've got it, that is what they were taught. And it's never, ever going to stop those children starving in Africa. What it does is make you feel guilty. And guilt is a horrible emotion because it makes us do things against our will because we feel we ought to. I'm going to come on to that in a minute, Tracy. Yeah, so, you know, it makes us feel that we ought to do something that really doesn't feel right. And when we are younger, when we're children, we are born, all of us are born with an innate knowledge of when we want to eat and when we don't want to eat. We're in tune with our body. We're completely in tune with our body. And we will eat when we're hungry, when we're naturally physically hungry, not when we're told to because it's 12 o'clock or it's 5 o'clock, or, you know, when we're hungry. And the problem is our very well-meaning parents, and they are well-meaning because they're thinking, you know, you must eat regularly because you've got to get the nutrition in, but they're very well-meaning. So I'm not taking anything away from any of you if you've said this to your children or you've had it said to you. But basically what we're doing is teaching children often to override their natural instinct of being full, and we are creating a nation or even a world of obese people because of it. Because if you look at animals in the wild that are not domesticated, I'm not talking about looking at dogs and cats, because we domesticate them and we put our social pressures on them and we feed them more than they need. If you look at an animal in the wild, you will never see a fat animal, period. Because they are completely in tune with their hunger instinct. They will hunt until they find food, and when they're full, they'll lie in the sun and they don't move and they don't eat anymore until they start to feel hungry again, and then they go out and they hunt, and they're in tune with that natural instinct. So when we are in the wild, when we're there, you know, when we're taught these things, to eat breakfast, lunch, dinner, supper, oh, they need a snack, have a snack in between, and yet they might be healthy snacks, a little box of raisins or a piece of fruit, or we don't need that much food. Any of you who've had a gastric sleeve or weight loss surgery will realise very quickly, I know I did, that I just looked at people's plates when they were full like this and thought, how can you eat that amount of food? Because it made me feel physically sick. And I'm perfectly healthy. I'm 7.5 years after surgery. I eat a small portion and I am perfectly healthy. Children don't need to eat regularly. When they're left to their own devices, what tends to happen, and tell me if you've got any children that are like this, because I had one son that was definitely like this, they'll go 3 or 4 days where they'll pick tiny bit here, tiny bit there, I'm off, running off, no, I don't want to eat now, I'll just have a little bit, half a sandwich, piece of toast, whatever it might be. And then on the 4th day or 5th day, you cannot fill them up because they're hungry. Now that is instinctual instinct, because just like the wild animal, when we were Neanderthal man, we would hunt. We were hunter-gatherers. So we'd live off tiny bits of berries and tiny bits of scrubs and things that we could get off the floor and out of the trees, but there wasn't a lot of food. And the men would go out and they'd hunt, and about every 3 or 4 days they'd come back with a wild boar that they've hunted, stick it on the fire, everybody would sit round and they would gorge on that food, and then when that was finished they'd have to wait 3 or 4 days for them to catch something else. So that's our innate natural drive, and everybody's is different, but the point is that, you know, we've got plentiful food, so as long as food is available, then we should never ever need to go hungry. But also we shouldn't be forced to eat when we're not hungry, because we're getting out of the intuitiveness with that food, you know, with our natural instincts of mindful eating, if you like, totally mindful eating. So what good meaning parents will do, they'll say things like there are starving children in Africa, and that'll make you feel guilty. And guilt's a terrible thing, because you'll do things that you don't want to do, that go against your natural instincts, and you'll do it over and over again, and you will eat more than you need to eat. And, you know, for a very long time it'll have no effect, because when you're younger you run around like mad in the playground, you're outside, you're jumping around. You know, young children are never still, so they burn it all off and it doesn't really matter. But as we get older and older, because our food script has taught us to feel guilty if we don't eat everything on our plate, or there's going to be, I'm going to tell you some others in a minute that are the opposite. What happens is that we take that into later life. And then when we're not running around and we're not as active, or a bit less mobile, and we put weight on, and then we put more weight on and we become less active, and then some emotional eating will come in with that because we feel guilty and shameful about ourselves, and it's a perpetual roller coaster. But it all starts often with this food script in families very early in life. And yeah, so some of the others that I've got down here are things like, if you don't eat it all, you'll get it for breakfast. Tracy said that above. You'll get it tomorrow. and making children sit at the table and eat unpalatable, cold food that often they didn't like, they certainly didn't want it. What for? And again, no criticism if you were one of these, no criticism of you. I know that everybody's doing the best they can, so please don't take it as a criticism. But when you look at it in its cold reality of day, it actually, what's the objective? Usually it's because the child said no and the parents not having them say no. So it's like a battle of wills. And that battle of wills, if you've got a child that's often saying no, can often be that will around food, and can set a child up with a dysfunctional relationship with food from a very early age. And making somebody eat it cold for breakfast, if you're being honest with you, is pretty cruel. It's not a very nice thing to do to a child at all. I'm going to go into some of the reasons or the ways that this will affect you when I've gone through these, and how you can counteract them later. So I've got here, sorry, I've made some notes so that I don't forget them. So you're going to, if you don't eat all of your main course, you can't have dessert. So in other words, in order to eat the thing that's going to make you, most likely to make you fat, you've got to eat all the other stuff, and then you can have that as well. So let's double the amount of food that you need to eat. But if you don't eat it all, you can't have your dessert. Again, it just doesn't make sense. It really doesn't. Because it's actually encouraging people to eat more than they need or they want all the time. And that is never going to be healthy or helpful for a child. So I would always suggest that you just don't do the dessert. The dessert is like an occasional treat. It's an occasional treat that doesn't need to be directly after the food, after the meal. It can be at a different time in the day. And, not necessarily as a reward for eating something else. It could be as a reward for doing something else if you feel the need to give children desserts. So the other one, and that obviously, eating the food to get the dessert is definitely going to set people up with an attitude of eating more than they need. Yeah. Food is bad. So if food is bad, so what I mean by that is, again, really well-meaning parents, and I've got them in my family, restricting certain foods because it's seen as being a really bad thing. So not allowing children to have any sugar, not allowing children to eat carbs, things like that. Really well-meaning, but the problem with that is that you're setting children up that for in later life it's forbidden fruit. And everybody on this call watching will know what that's like when you go on a diet and you're told that you cannot eat a food group or a food item, and it's the only thing you can think about. If I said to all of you tomorrow, you cannot ever eat chocolate again, the only thing you'd be able to think about most of the time would be chocolate, if you like chocolate. And it's the same with children. They see other kids eating it and they go, I wonder what that's like. Even people that are vegetarian, most of the children go through a phase of trying meat because they're curious. They want to know what they're missing out on. So if you're going to say to people, don't eat sugar, and you're going to restrict it that much, you are possibly setting your children up to, once sugar is freely available to them, then they will start to copiously eat sugar. So, that moderation thing is a much better thing to do rather than completely restrict it. Some people are brought up not having enough food. So there's not enough food to go around, and they're aware that their parents are doing without. I hate to say that, but I had this when I was little. My mum and dad split up, and my mum didn't have very much money at all. And I remember sitting at the dinner table. It makes me want to cry when I'm thinking of it now. She's not here with me anymore, my real mum. Sitting at the dinner table and knowing that she wasn't eating, and I'd say to her, Mummy, why are you not having tea with me? And she'd say, it's okay, darling, I'm going to have mine later. And I absolutely knew at that time that she wasn't going to eat because she couldn't afford to eat to feed us both. And that food used to stick in my mouth because I knew that I was eating and my mum wasn't. But because she was going with that, even though I didn't really want it, I would eat it. I'd make sure I ate it. And you know, it's a similar thing to that starving children in Africa. So but the other thing that what can happen is, if you don't have enough food, is that when people get older and they get independent, they binge on food because they're used to not having enough when they were little. So even though there's enough food, they've got their own like income and they can buy it, they have episodes of binging because it goes back and it's triggered back to that time of the childhood where you had to almost fight for every bit of food that was on the table. So the subconscious counteracts that by going, look, see, I can have whatever I want, and I'm going to have whatever I want whenever I want. And then that ends up being continual binge eating. I don't know that anybody can see that. Tracy's put that was my mum too, and my mum was overweight, so she wasn't eating the correct food. Okay, yeah, it's difficult to know what you're actually replying to me there, Tracy. So which one it is? Maybe you could just write in which one you're talking about, and then I can talk to you later, or I can type something. And then there's the last two, which actually is almost the opposite. It's like what I call there, darling. There. It's okay. Have a sweetie. There. Have an ice cream. There, it's not so bad. Have some chocolate, you'll feel better. And children are brought up with the understanding that if there's something wrong with them, or they're emotionally upset or physically upset, that food will fix it from a very, very early age. So they're taught, if you just eat these, you'll feel better. And because there is a physical change in our physiology when we do eat food, particularly sugar food, it does feel better, because sugar's a drug. You know, it's harder to detox from sugar than it is from cocaine, and sugar is a drug, so it does. I was watching a video I was watching this video the other week on YouTube, and it was only about 19 seconds clip. I think one of my coaching clients who's on here actually put it on her Facebook page, and it was a picture of it was a video of a little baby eating ice cream for the first time. And it was like they put the ice cream to his baby's mouth, and it went like that, and then literally its eyes went, and then it grabbed hold of it, and it wouldn't let go of this ice cream, because that's like giving, you know, a drug to a baby, the amount of sugar. So if we're giving children something that alters their mental state and makes them feel high when they're not feeling so good, they've fallen over or they're upset or anything, that's a very, very strong reaction that they've learned from being very, very young, that they're going to take on into their adult life. And it's so difficult to stop that. And people will say, I'm not an emotional eater, I just eat all the time, because it's like a progressive disease. It just gets more and more, and that vicious circle of eating it, feeling guilty makes me feel worse, and then I'm going to eat it again, because I was always taught that if I felt uncomfortable, to eat sugar. So it's just a circle that goes round and round and round and doesn't stop. And then the last one is where you've got, and a lot of my Irish clients have this, the mammy of the family that loves to cook big Irish stews, cakes, puddings, you know, all of this lovely food, and that is the way they show their love. You know, it's like, sit down, darling, come on, fill your plate, fill your boots, you're not leaving this table until you've eaten this, look, I've made this cake for you. You can't say no, I've spent all day in the kitchen. And that feeling of feeling enveloped in this absolute blanket of love that's being demonstrated by this food that's been put in front of you on the table. And that is, you know, again, it's a very powerful driving force, because everybody has what we call basic human needs, and there are 7 levels of basic human needs, but the very top one is love and connection. And we need to feel loved, and we need to feel connected. And if we are shown love through food, we tend to show love through food when we're older. So we take it on, so we do lots of nice cooking, we show it to our children, we give it to them, and of course, because we love cooking and we love showing food, we're eating it. And if we're feeling in any way slightly unloved, then we're going to eat food. Now, I don't know about you, but I know as my weight got bigger and bigger and bigger, I felt less and less loved. I don't think that that was necessarily the case. I think I was less and less attractive, but I don't think I was less and less loved. But I believed I was, and probably, or most likely, because I didn't love myself. I didn't love who I had become. I didn't love the fact that I'd allowed myself to get like that. So because I didn't love myself, I was seeking love from elsewhere. And it didn't matter what anybody said to me, because I didn't love myself and I didn't believe it. If my husband had told me 20 times a day he loved me dearly, I didn't believe it, because I didn't love myself. So how could anybody else love me? Because I felt I was not lovable. And the bigger I got, the more like that I felt. Does anybody get this? Give me some hearts if you do, or comments or something if you get that this like connection. So the bigger I got, the less loved I felt, because I loved myself less, and therefore I didn't believe that anybody else could love me, because I didn't love myself. Excellent, you get it. So the thing about it is that all we want is love. We really want to be loved, but because we don't believe we're lovable, and because we feel lacking in love, when we've learnt to equate food with love, what we'll do to make ourselves feel loved is eat. What does that do? That makes us increase the weight even more. So we increase the weight even more, we feel less lovable. We feel less lovable, therefore we feel we need more love, so we eat. And it's a vicious circle. All of this is a vicious circle. And the thing about it often is that our biggest fear is what we create. So our biggest fear is not being loved. We put weight on, so we feel less loved. Because we feel less loved, we eat more, because food and love is similar to us. And then we put more weight on, we've got less loved. And it's like, the daft thing is that we need to break that down and work out where that's coming from and stop it. So find out how we can do this without making, it's what they call a self-fulfilling prophecy. I'm not lovable, I'm going to make myself not lovable, and therefore I can prove to myself that I'm not lovable. But I really want to be loved, so I'll keep eating, but then I'll feel even less lovable. So what you've got to do is to find a way of loving yourself, and find a way of, and the first thing you ever did was by having the surgery, because you took control and you said, I love me enough not to let this continue. I love myself enough to put myself first. And that was the very best thing that you ever did for yourself. But often people will find that just having the surgery itself is not enough to actually make that switch to feeling lovable. Because feeling lovable isn't all from the outside and how we look, it's about how we feel from the inside. And we have to work on that internal stuff, so that we feel lovable, so that when we feel lovable, we can be loved. We can allow ourselves to be loved. So there's a catalogue of emotions that are going on here that need breaking down and that need looking at with a semi-microscope to work out what's going on and where these things have come from and how they all intertwine. And that's what I do with my coaching clients. You know, this and many, 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 many other things. There's loads of things we do together. To break all this down so that you're not being derailed by this at a later date when things get easier, it's not as exciting, the weight's not falling off as quickly, that you're, so making sure that you've got absolutely the best tools in your toolkit to counteract all of these. Now you're going to say to me, okay, I've told you these, so can I do anything about them? Are they going to be with me forever? Well, the thing about scripts are, they're just a story that's in our head. And you will have 5 children around that table and 5 children will have a completely different script. Or it might be similar in similar ways, but it won't be exactly the same, because it's not truth. It's just what you have come to believe from that situation. And what happens is your subconscious mind stores that belief back in your memory box, because it can't. Your subconscious mind is there to store as many pathways as possible that can be accessed quickly in terms of memory, because it can't work out what to do immediately in every situation. Your conscious mind's not powerful enough to do that. So your subconscious mind takes a situation like eating at the table when starving children in Africa, for example, and it goes, I've got to eat everything at the table or else those children in Africa are going to starve. And I genuinely believed that when I was little. I actually believed that those children were going to starve as a result of me not eating my food. And I remember sitting there thinking, I've got to eat this. And I didn't want it. And I felt awful. These little babies that were, you know, I'd seen them on TV with like their ribs. And I thought, I'm causing that if I don't eat this. I'd never made the connection that they couldn't possibly get this food that was on my plate. So, but you see, you've got that. So that I'd made that connection that I've got to eat all my food because it's so wrong because there's starving children in Africa. So that has gone into my subconscious mind. My subconscious mind, every time it sees a plate of food now, goes, you've got to eat all your food. It doesn't remember the starving children in Africa. It just knows that if you don't eat all, you're going to feel uncomfortable. You're going to feel guilty for some reason. Now, what you have to do is you've got to reprogram that script. And in order to do that, you have to alter that story in your subconscious mind. And there's loads of ways that we do that. We do something called echo tap. I do echo tapping. I do something called the ball of light exercise, where we take the love out of the food and we put the love inside us, and then we keep that love inside us, but we throw the food away. I do things around what I call substitution and swapping things out. So, for example, what you can do, one of the practical things I will give you some advice on, is that if you're one of those people that, where is it? What have I got here? That food is love, for example, that you equate food with love, is you write a list of things that you can do to love yourself that don't involve food. And every time you're feeling that and you identify that I need some love, if you can identify it, and that's another thing we'll learn, how to identify our feelings, because so many of us are so disassociated with our feelings by the time we've been self-medicating them with food for such a long time, we don't know how to feel again. But if you can get that feeling, think, you know, I just need loving, getting your list out and going, right, okay, I'm going to have a hot bath instead, I'm going to go and cuddle my dogs or whatever it is, it takes effort. But the thing is, what we've got to try to do after we've had surgery is, the practical thing is, we need to build up our resistance muscle. Because we have been using the giving in muscle for so long. Oh, God, forget it. I'm just going to give and I can't be bothered. This is too much hard work. I deserve this. I'll give in to the food. And what we've got to do is we've got to build our resistance muscle. Now, you know, if you're building any muscle, at first it hurts. It's hard. It's difficult. You have to think about it. Remember when you learnt to drive for the first time? I remember thinking, how do people do this? Mirror, gear stick, maneuver, indicate, you know, how do they do all that without thinking? My mum just drives down the street, she's not going, you know, mirror, indicate, gear, she's not thinking that, she just, you know, and that's a bit like this. Because when you're driving at first, your subconscious mind has no memory of that. So it has to consciously think it. After a while, it goes, this is what we do when we get to that junction. And it just stores it. You don't think about it. You don't think about indicating. You don't think about looking in the mirror. In fact, if I asked you if you did, you'd probably say you didn't. But you do, because it's just second nature. It's been driven by your subconscious and not your conscious. But to begin with, you've got to think about it. Your subconscious has got to learn a new way. And this is what we have to do with this stuff. So we have to teach our subconscious a different way of relating to these feelings and emotions and situations that actually align with the goals that we now want. As an adult who needs to release a decent amount of weight. So we've got to find a way of giving our subconscious mind a new script, a new way of thinking about it, but that takes a little time. Because you've got to do it a few times for it to overwrite the old one. So when you're not seeing an immediate effect, it's about doing it every time. So one emotion. So if it's I feel love, every time you feel you need love, don't eat on it. Do something different. Go and get a hot bath. Go for a nice long walk. Phone a friend that makes you laugh. Anything like that. Something. You write your own list. Because if I give it all to you, you won't be investing in it. So yeah, so that's just one of the things that you can do to help. But this food script stuff really, really interesting when you look at it, and it can really make a difference between you being long-term successful or this stuff coming back to bite you at a later date. When things just get that bit easier, the compliments stop happening, you know, it's just normal life. It's not new, and it's not different, and it's not exciting anymore. And you know, that's when the uneasy feelings start to come instead of the joy, and therefore you need to retrain your mind. It's a bit like retrain your dragon. Retrain your mind to do things differently. I'm going to leave it with you for today and let you have a think about that. If anybody is interested in working with me or wants to find out more about my program, drop me a private message or or comment on here, and then I can get in touch with you and let you know more. Okay, have a lovely evening. Hopefully I will see you next week. Next week, with a bit of luck, my adopted mum has got a appointment at the cancer oncology specialist on Wednesday, so I'm hoping it'll all be all right, but I've got to just play it by ear. But if everything's okay and I'm okay to do next Wednesday nights while I'm up with her, we will have our bariatric dietitian Vandana Patel. She's coming on. She's going to talk to us about bariatric nutrition and what she does, and take questions from anybody if they've got any questions about nutrition side of things. So join us next Wednesday at 7 p.m. With a bit of luck, that will be on next Wednesday. So take care, everybody. I will speak to you next week. Okay then, bye.